White roses. Genus, Rosa. Family, Rosacea. Common name, evening star. Mr. Hughes took a dozen of them to his wife's grave every weekend, rain or shine. He had for the past year. He didn't care about the genus or the species, only that there were 12 of them waiting for him every Sunday, wrapped in brown paper and tied with a string. My mom was going to have to tell him that the delivery truck hadn't arrived last night like it was supposed to. It flipped over on the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway. The driver was okay, but our shipment of Evening Star was scattered across 6 lanes of traffic. "I'm so sorry, Robert," Mom said, as Mr. Hughes, dressed in his Sunday best, came into the shop. "There was an accident, and we didn't get our regular shipment. We should have new delivery in the next few days." He gripped the lapels of his freshly pressed navy blazer, his bottom lip quivering as he ran his hand over his mouth and sighed. He looked like he might fold in on himself. Grief was heavy. It could do that to a person. "We've got some beautiful peonies," Mom said. "The Ann Cousins variety. They're gorgeous, Robert. I could put them in together for you right now." I pushed my glasses up and peered around the arrangement I was working on. Mr. Hughes' brows furrowed. We had a single white rose in a vase on the back counter, a remnant of a wedding bouquet I'd put together the day before. I looked down at my hands, opening and closing them. I wanted to help, but I couldn't. It was too dangerous. "I miss her so much, Sandy," Mr. Hughes said, his voice choked with sadness. "The people we love are never really gone from us," Mom said. "Try to remember that. I know it's hard. It feels like the whole world should just stop spinning, but it doesn't. And we've got to find a way to pick up the pieces." Mom always knew exactly what to say. Mr. Hughes and his wife used to come into the shop together. Now it was just him, and it made me so sad I could hardly stand it. The arrangement on the table in front of me began to wilt. "Hang on, Mr. Hughes," I said. He looked at me quizzically. I glanced at my mom for a second longer than I needed to. Her face grew tight with concern. I plucked the single rose from the vase, rushed down to the short hallway and out the back door. The 8x10 square of dirt our landlord had the nerve to call our garden was where we kept the bigger plants that couldn't fit in the shop. Our recent shipment of chaste tree crowded the space, their spiky violet blooms just beginning to open in the damp heat of summer. My hands trembled as I knelt, and I stripped the rose of its velvety petals down to the pistil, the seedy heart of the flower. Any part of the plant would have been enough to make another like it, but having the pistil made it easier. A familiar tingling sensation crept down my arm. It started at my shoulder and trickled down to my elbow, then into my forearm. I glanced at the newly installed wooden pickets of the rear fence. They reminded me of what could happen if I lost control, even for a second. I scooped a little hole in the ground and I set the pistil inside. Covering it with loose earth, I placed my hands over it, sinking my fingers into the dirt, and closed my eyes. Just breathe. The tingling spread into my fingertips, warm and oddly comforting. A swell of anticipation crashed through me as the stout evergreen stalk broke through the dirt and immediately sprouted several small offshoots. They pushed their way up between my outstretched fingers. Sweat dampened my back and forehead. I clenched my teeth until the muscles in my temples ached. The new stalks reached toward the sun, their stems thickening, thorns sprouting but never close enough to prick my fingers. Buds bloomed white as snow between new leaflets green as emeralds. Right before their petals unfurled, I pulled my hands back, clutching them against my chest. Dizziness washed over me. Orbs of light danced around the edges of my vision as I sucked in a breath, filled my chest with the sticky summertime air, then pushed it out. My heartbeat slowed to a normal rhythm. 6 white roses dotted the newly formed branches. Welcome to Reading Rural, y'all, where we talk about all things rural YA literature and to the rural authors who write it. I'm your host, Dr. Shay Parton, and I'm excited to talk to you about today's topic at hand. If you're a teacher, student, or community member in a rural community, my hope is that the content here honors you and your experiences by discussing and analyzing books that can serve as a mirror for you. If you're an urban or suburban teacher, student, or community member, this series is for you too, and I hope that it can provide nuance to the stereotypical depictions of rural people so often seen in popular media. So come on in, and let's get to it. Hey y'all. I hope you had a lovely Thanksgiving harvest meal with your loved ones. We had a good one here. It's finally starting to get a little bit cooler, which is nice, especially after being in Anaheim for NCTE. I just got back a little bit ago and have been following the posts from folks who were able to attend Allen this year. And man, it looks like those book boxes had some great titles. I'm having some major FOMO and jealousy over here, but I'm excited for everyone there and I'm enjoying following along via their social media posts. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you are a classroom ELA teacher and you can somehow scrape together funds for at least one of the teachers in your department to go to Allen, that box of 40-something books can be a huge boon for y'all's classroom libraries. I'll put a link to the Allen website in the description, and I highly, highly recommend that you check it out. Additionally, I've got my ear to the ground trying to discover some new rural YA titles, but if y'all know of any, please send them my way at readingrural@gmail.com. One of those titles in the Allen boxes this year is This Wicked Fate, which is the sequel to the Whippoorwill award-winning This Poison Heart by Kalynn Bayron, which subsequently is the subject of this newest series of Reading Rule, y'all. In this first episode, I'll give you the summary and a brief analysis of the rurality in the text, as well as read the first few pages, which you would have already heard if you started at the beginning of this video anyways. So let's get into it. Here's the summary. In This Poison Heart, we follow Briseis, or Bree, as she's called in the text for short. And we sort of follow her and her moms as they fight a losing battle with gentrification in Brooklyn. And just as they're beginning to make some tough decisions about their life and their flower shop in the city, a lawyer, a mysterious lawyer, shows up to tell them that Bree has actually been left a sprawling mansion in the country by the biological family who put her up for adoption all those years ago. Despite concerns about what it'll be like for them, a queer black family, to live outside of the city, they move anyway. Between the rising rent and Bree's conspicuous interactions with plants, like the way trees bend toward her and flowers sprout and reach for her, moving to the country seems worth the risk because it's so much more visible in the city than it would be in a rural area where there's more plant life. Bree wants to learn more about where and who she comes from, especially after discovering she's impervious to plants that would normally kill any regular human being, but they all may get much, much more than they bargained for. It's super good. You should definitely check it out. Now for some analysis. Rurality in This Poison Heart works to build and shape the characters' identities, especially Bree's. It's one of those books that really highlights and illuminates in a really powerful way the way that place plays a role in who we are and how we see ourselves and how we see the others around us, especially because of the movement from a more urban space to a more rural space, and learning. Both Bree and her moms have to learn about who they are and develop their identity outside of the place that they've known for most of their lives. And so figuring out the country versions of themselves or how they fit into the rural landscape and into a rural community is a really big part of this book, and one of the reasons why I liked it so much. It is a great story. It is a super good story. I was totally hooked by it, and so there's more to it than that, but in terms of like the way that rurality functions in the text, that's one of the things that it does. The rural community and manor where the family moves helps Bree learn about who she is through her connections to her biological family and their ties to ancient Greek deities. It also exposes both undesirable and desirable aspects of having a rural identity, especially when that rural identity is layered with other marginalized identities like queer identities, racialized identities, that kind of thing. On the one hand, moving out there, Bree is concerned that It'll be like being in the movie Get Out. She mentions this on multiple occasions, so she's clearly concerned that moving to the country means that she and her moms will face racism and bigotry in a way that they hadn't experienced while living in the city. And while these fears are largely drawing on dominant deficit narratives of rural places and people, they're not altogether unfounded, since racism exists everywhere and bad stuff starts to happen when they're in the town. She finds her tire slashed after being attacked at a small theater in town, and that's not necessarily tied to who she is as a Black woman, and or tied to the queerness of her family. It's tied to something else in the book, but I think all of those things together inspire or offer an opportunity to think about how race and rurality are connected in the way that we think about those things as connected and layered. And so there's kind of a negative aspect there, but the country is also a place where she can more fully be herself in a way that she couldn't in the city. Because the house is more isolated and there's more plant life in general, Bree's interactions with plants are less conspicuous in the country than they were in the city. And so much so that one of Bree's moms says, "Listen, I talked to Mo," her other mom, "and she got me thinking, maybe you can let your guard down while we're out here." Both Mo and Bree's mom, both of her moms, think that being in the country means that Bree's going to be able to stretch and learn more about her powers now that they're in a country setting than she would be able to living in Brooklyn. And despite all of the bad things that happen when they're living in the manor and all of the things that they don't understand, they still at every turn decide to stay because of that. Because Bree gets to learn more about who she came from, and because she gets to learn more about what she can do in terms of her powers and her interactions with plants. So who Bree is, what she can do, those are major reasons that they leave Brooklyn and why they stay in the country. Not only because of all of the noticeability of her power in the city among relatively small amounts of plant life, but because the house was part of her family and her bloodline. Despite the frequent references to Get Out and the fear of racism and homophobia in the little affluent town they settle near, ultimately the country is where Bree can let herself engage with her power and develop it, as well as learn who she's from and who she wants to be. Bree's experiences in developing her identity in this way across these different spaces, though fantastical in this case, isn't really all that different from the ways that we do this in real life. Despite her powers, her desire to know who and where she's come from, and her fears of being forced to confront people and ideologies that threaten her safety and life are unfortunately relatable to many of our own realities and lives. And so being able to follow Bree and have these discussions would be incredibly helpful for young rural folks of multiple and various identity positions to consider who they are and how that would be received and shaped by in different types of places, including in their own communities. And based on what they, think about and realize about who they are in their communities, they can think about how they can work to improve their communities in terms of how welcoming and inclusive and accepting those communities are of people of various identity positions. In terms of that, I'll give some ideas for what this could look like in the next episode of the series, so stay tuned for that. And I'm adding Bayron as an author that I auto order from, and you should totally do the same. Or at the very least, get you a copy of This Poison Heart and This Wicked Fate. I promise you'll be glad that you did. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this week's episode. If you like what you heard and want to support the show and keep it a viable endeavor for me, it'd be great if you would like and comment on the YouTube episode. You could talk about what you liked most or what you walked away with. It'd also help if you'd subscribe to the channel. You can also head over to the Support Us page on the Literacy in Place website. There you can learn about all the different ways you can support this work. Like, you can like and follow the website itself, find out where to engage with us via social media, and go leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Or you could shop our storefront on bookshop.org to get the book featured in this episode or any other books that catch your eye. You could also buy us a coffee at ko-fi.com and donate once or set up a recurring donation. All of this would be immensely helpful in keeping this show going. So thanks a bunch for doing what you can. Well, that's it for this episode. Until next time, y'all come back now, would ya?